Today's presentation is really to give you an overview of what House Bill 1040 is. And in my mind, it has three parts. It closes our current defined benefit main plan to any new hire that's first enrolled January 1st, 2025 or later. And I notice that I emphasize the word newly enrolled, and we'll get into that in future slides, but it's not a new hire, it's newly enrolled. It also creates and establishes a new defined contribution tier. As you probably know, we have two defined contribution plans right now, tier 1 and 2, and this is adding a third tier. And then finally, it's going to define how we're going to continue to fund the defined benefit plan for those who are currently participating. So let's dig into closes the main defined benefit plan for those first enrolled on or after January 1st, 2025. And so I'm making a big deal about first enrolled, and here's the reason why. Let's say that you have a new hire to you, but they have a prior relationship with the state of North Dakota, and maybe they had participated in the main defined benefit plan many years ago, and they left those funds intact. They are a new hire to you, but they're not newly enrolled with us. Therefore, they are going to be grandfathered under that current defined benefit plan that they participated in. Now, one thing I want to mention and go over this, because I never like to assume that anybody knows the difference between a defined benefit and a defined contribution plan. So let's just visit this real quick. Notice on the left on the defined benefit plan, this is defined by a formula: final average salary, years of service, and the benefit multiplier, and that yields a single life benefit. It's guaranteed for life. The funds that are being put into this plan are invested on behalf of the employee. There's also a vesting schedule. It's called cliff vesting. It's all or nothing. So in the main defined benefit plans, one must have 36 months of service, or if they turn 65 while actively employed, they're automatically vested. Now, on the defined contribution side, I liken that to like a 401k. And so the monies that go into this plan are invested by the employee, and their strategy is going to map out their stream of income for the rest of their life. Vesting in a defined contribution plan is a little different too. It's gradual vesting. So the way this works is day one, the employee is 100% vested in all of the employee funds, but they need to be with the employer 2 years to get 50% of the employer funds. They need to be 3 years to get 75%, and then 4 years, 100%. So again, day one, their bucket is totally theirs, but to get the employer bucket, they need to do this gradual vesting. And again, with this plan, if one turns 65 while employed, they're 100% vested. So House Bill 1040 creates and establishes Tier 3 in the defined contribution plan. What is your role as an employer? Well, this is really huge. This is how you can help your new employee out and PERS. Is really be on the ball with onboarding them and getting them in our system. And the reason why is because, and we're going to dive into this new plan and how it works, but really big deal because within the first 30 days, there's a matching provision where your new employee can pick up to 3% in our defined contribution plan. So if you hired somebody January 1, but you didn't get them in our system till January 15, you've just shortened their opportunity to pick that matching contribution. Now, Derek Hovine with ND PERS is going to be presenting something on December 12th for employers for more information about employer self-service and member self-service. So please join that. That'll be really informative. Okay, so to be eligible for the Defined Contribution 2025 Tier 3 plan, a person must be, it's the same criteria as today for our defined benefit plans, guys. Got to be 18 years of age. You got to work at least 20 hours a week for 20 or more weeks a year. And the position must be regularly funded and not of limited duration. Now, notice that we have in bold, it does not have a previous active or suspended enrollment with ND PERS. That's what I talked about a few slides back. So, and this is going to be tough for you as employers because you may be hiring somebody and wanting to talk about the benefits that they're eligible for, but you do not know whether they have a prior relationship with us. So just be cognizant of that. So it could be somebody that worked 10 years ago, had a year or two in our defined benefit plan, left it intact. And so when you reemploy them, they're grandfathered under that DB plan. But anybody who doesn't have a prior relationship with us will be put into the Defined Contribution 2025 Tier 3. Know that only the main defined benefit plan is closing. So we have about 9 retirement plans that we manage. And so this is only the main Tier 1, 2, and 3. And so if you have folks that are in public safety in your plans, then this is not impacting them. Okay, so other folks that are eligible are those same appointed or elected officials that would be eligible today. So if you have an appointed or elected official today that would have been eligible to go into our defined benefit plan today, they will be eligible effective January 1 if they're newly enrolled to be part of the Defined Contribution 2025. Other eligible folks, same as today, temporary employees, they have 180 days to make that decision. Now, the difference with temporary employees is that if they participate, it's totally at their own expense and it's all after-tax money. So you're going to see some differences with this plan too, as far as the contributions. There's a 4% employee contribution and a 5.26% employer contribution. And again, remember, day one, the employee is vested totally in their contributions, their bucket. But in order to get the employer bucket in this defined contribution plan, they must work at least 2 years to get half of that bucket, 3 years to get 75, and 4 years to get 100%. And again, if somebody turns 65 while actively employed, shebang, they're 100% vested. Okay. Here's another big difference with this defined contribution plan. There's an employer match. And so a few slides back, I mentioned how critical it is that newly enrolled people are reported to us right away. Because when you report them to us, you know, it causes us to send a welcome package with a bunch of information. And so that's when their countdown begins when they're employed. So if they were employed with you on the 1st, but you don't report until the 15th, there's not a countdown from the 15th plus 30 days. It's from when you actually employed them, from the 1st. So you really want to give your employees the benefit of getting them in our system so that they can take advantage of this match. Okay, so here's how the match works. We know that there's a 4% employee contribution and a 5.26 employer contribution. This match is totally voluntary, but the really important thing with this is within the first 30 days, a person can choose to put up to 3% into the defined contribution plan, and you as the employer have to match that 3%. Now, again, the first 30 days, and it's irrevocable, And if they choose it on day 31, they're out of luck. So that's why it's really, really important to be proactive and get these guys in our system. Now, if a person misses that opportunity or they choose not to take that opportunity at any time, if you carry one of our 457 deferred comp plans, they could put up to 3% in there, and then you'll match that 3%. So this is an example of how the elections would work. And by the way, month one, if somebody elects 3% in defined contribution or a state of North Dakota 457 plan, the match will be effective the following month. Okay, but this is what your employee can expect. If they do nothing, they put their 4% in, you put the 526 in, there's going to be 9.26% that's going to the defined contribution plan. If the employee chooses to put 1% into either the defined contribution plan in the first 30 days or a state of North Dakota 457 plan, then you as the employer will match it. So they'll have 1126. They put 2% in, you put 2% in. They put 3% in, you put 3% in. And again, just know that if I'm hired in January and I make that election in either the defined contribution or state of North Dakota 457, that match and my contribution will be applied the next month. It's prospective. You can split contributions, an employee can split contributions. So let's say, for example, and again, DC, defined contribution match, has to be within the first 30 days. Let's say I decide to put 1% in there, and then I go, geez, maybe I want to get, that entire match. So a few months later, I throw 2% into a state of North Dakota 457 plan. You're going to match as an employer the 1% in the DC and 2% in deferred comp. Now, interestingly, guys, if I choose to put money as an employee into the defined contribution plan, it's irrevocable. I can never change that election. So if I commit 1%, I'm a 1% lifer. No matter whether I move to another agency, no matter whether I leave employment and come back, I'm committed to the 1%. With the 457 plan, I can change that election at any time. So where does this match go? If I put my money as an employee into the defined contribution plan, that 1% or the match that I'm going to get from the employer is going to go into the employer bucket in the defined contribution plan. I have to, as an employee, vest to get that employer money. Okay. If I put my money into a 457 plan, the employer is going to match me in the 457 plan. Excuse me. So this is just an example of if I decided that I was going to split my match. I put 1% into the DC plan, the employer matches the 1%. And then I choose to put as much as the IRS will allow me in my 457 plan. Let's say I put 4% of my pay into the deferred compensation plan, and that's fine and dandy, but the employer is only going to match 2% of that because the total match between the two can only be 3%. Okay, so back to temporary employees. They can choose to come onto the plan voluntarily. They get 180 days, but when they participate, they put the entire 926 in themselves and it's post-tax. If they elect to come onto the plan within the first 30 days of their election, they can put 6% into the defined contribution plan. There's no match for those folks. That's why they can do 6%. And it's after-tax money. Now, temporary employees are not eligible to participate in the ND PERS 457 plan, so that's not even an option. Then let's say your temporary employee becomes a permanent employee. Well, that kind of resets that 30-day window, because now they're not going to be funding their entire retirement plan. They'll be putting 4% in. You as an employer will do 526, and within that 30-day window, they could decrease their defined contribution to 3% and then have you as an employer match the other 3%. So this is how it will work, and we really, really like to push people to member self-service. And we'd appreciate it if you would have your new hires do that as well. The reason why is it's so efficient, and the election is real time, and there's none of that paper flow that's going back and forth. Of course, you know, if somebody doesn't have access to MSS, we do have paper forms, but we really, really want to encourage our employers to encourage their employees to go to member self-service. So of course, they would go on member self-service and they would make their election. They'll be in the DC plan, and then they could make that election within those first 30 days to put up to 3% into the DC plan and get that match. The other thing they could do, if they don't want to get the match in the DC plan, is they could, in member self-service, go ahead and elect to start and open a 457 plan and get that match. Now, that's only if you have our state of North Dakota 457 plans. And employees that voluntarily participate in the NDPERS DC plan, that's our temp people. Again, it's at their own expense, and they can also enroll through member self-service. Of course, there's always paper forms for all these things, but we really, really do encourage you to point your employees to member self-service. Okay, so we are working on our enrollment forms, but we wanted to give you a little sample of what that looks like. So for newly enrolled members effective January 1, this is what the paper form looks like. Now, member self-service is going to mimic this information, and Derek will show that to you in December. But it's pretty simple. Basically, you know, all the information, the demographics are at the top, and then they can choose right away. Hey, do I want to put 0, 1, 2, or 3 into the DC plan and get that match? This is what a temporary employee would see. And this is, again, going to be mimicked on MSS, but, you know, that they would have this situation where they can read through all this, acknowledge these, and here they get to go up to 6%. No match for a temporary. They're fully funding their own stuff. Okay. So these are common questions that we've thought of so far. And, you know, I'm hoping that you're filling our box with more questions so that, you know, we can check all our boxes and get as much information out there as we can. But here's one. We thought folks might want to know if an employee was enrolled in the DC 2025 Tier 3 and they left employment and they come back to a state agency or a political sub that has the NDPERS DC plan, does the employee get to change their additional contribution in the DC plan? And this is really important. It's a for sure match. If they go into the DC plan and do 1, 2, or 3%, the employer has to match that. But they need to know that it's irrevocable. So if out of the gate I do 3% into the defined contribution plan, I cannot change my mind throughout the course of my employment and participating in this plan. So another question is, what happens when a new hire has service in another NDPERS plan and accepts a position that offers the DC 2025? So let's say hypothetically, somebody has public safety service and they come and work at your agency, and you're not going to offer them the public safety plan. They don't qualify for it. They're the new defined contribution 2025 plan. They would be enrolled in the DC 2025 Tier 3. That public safety service would remain intact, but the DC service is not going to count towards vesting in the public safety plan. So like today, if somebody had public safety and then they came to work for you in our defined benefit main plan, they would have two plans. They'd be a dual member, and that main service would help to vest them in the public safety and vice versa. That's not how it works with the DC plan. So their public safety service would remain intact. The DC service would be brand spanking new going forward. So what happens after enrollment? Well, again, and I know I'm probably beating a dead horse to death, but please, please, please get them in our system ASAP, because it's going to spit out a welcome packet from us explaining all sorts of things and telling them what they're eligible for. That allows them to go into member self-service, and within those first 30 days, really be able to take advantage of that DC match, because there's no going back. I mean, it's irrevocable once they choose it. But if they miss choosing it, it's just a done deal. So really, that's our big ask from you, is to make sure that you're getting folks in the system ASAP. Then, excuse me, that employee will receive additional communication from Empower. And that's our record keeper for our defined contribution plan. Our plan is beginning in January of 2025 to have 1 or 2 live events each month, so that your new employees can log into a Teams event and really take advantage of understanding how their new plan works. So what if your organization doesn't participate in one of our North Dakota 457 deferred comp plans? Well, here's the deal. If your new employee doesn't take the opportunity or misses the opportunity to put up to 3% into the defined contribution plan the first 30 days, if again they have one of our 457 plans, if you do, then they could take advantage of getting that match in the 457 plan. However, if you don't carry our plan and you have your own, you are not required by law to match it. So let's say you have your own 457 or 430B, and an employee puts 3% in there, it's up to you if you want to match it. Now, if you want to give your employees that opportunity to be in one of our 457 plans, you can certainly join them. There is a process, and I sent something out, I want to say in March. And so you probably deleted that email, but I'm happy to send it to you again if you're interested. But if your organization is interested in joining our NDPERS 457 plans, it's a pretty simple deal. You just need to fill out the paperwork and get a board resolution and all that good stuff. And I'm happy to talk to you about it. Give me a holler if you have questions. Okay. So joining our 457 plans, you just need to read the enrollment information. You complete and submit our deferred compensation agreement. You submit a signed board resolution, and then you can send them to me. And then we get you enrolled, your organization, and then your employees can participate. 2 common questions that I've received from political subdivisions would be, if we enroll in state of North Dakota 457 plans, can our current employees participate? And the answer is yes. Any of your employees would be able to. They just wouldn't be getting matches. So the match portion of this is only for those folks that are going to be in our new DC 2025 plan. The other question is, can we join at any time? And the answer is yes. You could choose to join next June if you want, but really to give opportunities to your newly enrolled folks for January 2025, you probably want to get this party started in January. So just be cognizant that if you don't have a 457 or 403B and you want to have ours available to your employees, you can join them. If you do have your own 457 or 403Bs, and then you need to organizationally make that decision whether or not you want to match the employees. But if an employee is in the R457 plans, then by law you have to match. Okay. Now we're going to talk about how our current defined benefit main plan will continue to be funded. Another question that I've been getting, I think, not a lot about the funding, but some employees I think might be confused that since we're going to have a new defined contribution in 2025, current employees that are in our defined benefit plans, I've had a few people ask if they have to be in this new defined contribution plan. And the answer is no. I mean, they're in our defined benefit plan. We're grandfathered in there, we stay in it. The only time that I'd have to be in a defined contribution 2025 is if I left employment and cashed out my defined benefit plan, came back to work after January 2025, then I've forfeited my ability to remain in a defined benefit plan. Now I have to be in a defined contribution. But you can assure that your current employees that the plan they're in is the plan that they will stay in. Okay, so how are we going to fund our defined benefit plan going forward? There's a one-time transfer of 135 million from the Strategic Investment and Improvements Fund. Now, each biennium, if revenues warrant, there's going to be a transfer of 65 million from the State General Fund oil and gases and gas tax revenue. The state, not you political subs, but our state employers, beginning January of this year, started putting an additional 1% in for contributions. There's also going to be something called ADAC, which is actuarially determined employer contribution, and that will be, and this is only for state, which will be effective January 1st through December 31st of 2056, so like 30 years. But the state employers are really carrying a lot of this funding. You can see that with the 1% additional, this ADAC that's going to happen. And then any cash injections received, it's going to benefit both state and political sub-employers.